Whether or not you've heard of Adobe Camera Raw, or ACR as we affectionately refer to it, you've without a doubt benefited from the hard work that this amazing team has done over the years. Basically, think of ACR as the engine that drives Lightroom's edit stack. Every Lightroom editing tutorial that every single YouTuber has shared, including myself, has benefited from ACR because without it, we wouldn't have all these powerful tools at our disposal. So, last week I shared a video showcasing the new features added to Lightroom 9.3, but that wasn't the only app to get some powerful additions. ACR 18.3 also got some powerful new tools, some of which have been asked for by pros for years. Now, it's important to note that ACR requires a host app, such as Photoshop or Bridge. As such, you'll need to be subscribed to a plan that includes Photoshop to check out these features, at least until they make their way to Lightroom. I'll explain more about what that means in a few minutes, but for now, let's dive in. All right, so here we are in Adobe Bridge. So Bridge is kind of like a really powerful file browser, and I use this to access Adobe Camera Raw. But like I said, you can also use Photoshop to access Camera Raw. I just find this more convenient. So the first feature that I want to show you is something I mentioned. This was something that has been asked for by pros for a very long time, and that is anamorphic desqueeze. So if you use a camera with an anamorphic lens, if the software that you're using doesn't automatically desqueeze it based on the aspect ratio of that lens, you're going to get this kind of like squished image. But now in Adobe Camera Raw, we can desqueeze that for you. But before I show you what I mean, let me show you what I used. So this is the anamorphic lens made by a company called Reflex. And in full disclosure, they sent me this lens. This was like a few years ago. It was a prototype lens, but it's an anamorphic lens for the iPhone. It's a 1.33x lens. And so this is basically from their website, and it's what it looks like. That I just want to kind of give you a visual of what an anamorphic lens looks like. And so I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to open this photo. I used the Moment camera app on my iPhone 17 Pro Max. You can see that right up here. And you can see that it was Moment because of the file name. The reason why I used the Moment lens is because at the time, the Moment lens actually gave me a desqueezed preview. So even though the actual photo, the DNG that I took was squeezed, I was able to see the desqueezed preview on my iPhone, which made it a lot easier for me to compose it. And so you can see how this kind of looks weird, right? Like it looks kind of squished, and it'll make a lot of sense once I desqueeze it. And so to do that, what I'm going to do is go to the crop panel over here. And you'll see that there is now an anamorphic section over here. And there are several presets here of common kind of anamorphic aspect ratios. There's 1.33x, 1.6x, and 2. I mentioned how this lens was a 1.33x anamorphic lens. So as soon as I click that, now you can see this looks, it kind of has that widescreen look to it, that kind of like cinematic widescreen letterbox look. Now, of course, you can also use this slider here if you want to manually adjust the desqueeze rate over here, but I'm just going to stick with 1.33x, and then I'm going to drop out so you can see the image without the crop guides. And so again, you can see this is what the Moment app showed me, and it like I said, it has a very, very interesting composition. Of course, I'm going to click Done here to return to Bridge. And I'm going to open up this one here. It also works with vertical photos. So this probably is a bit more, you can see it right away, the kind of non-desqueezed look. I'm going to go to crop. I'm going to click on 1.33. And then there you go. We now have this really nice vertical composition here where it's properly presented in this anamorphic aspect ratio. And so let's go ahead and click on Done. Now, here's the really, really, really important point that I want to bring up. And that has to do with if I take these photos, which are DNGs, and I open them in Lightroom, because anamorphic desqueeze is not currently in Lightroom, and this is whether it's Lightroom or Lightroom Classic, it won't recognize those edits. So let me show you what I mean by that. All right, so I'm going to switch over to Lightroom here. I'm in local. These are the two photos. You can see how this is not desqueezed. This is not desqueezed. But if I go back to Bridge, you can see that if I open this up again in Adobe Camera Raw, it's desqueezed. And so if you want to benefit from anamorphic desqueeze while it's still in Adobe Camera Raw, and you also want to continue editing in Lightroom, what you'll have to do is export this photo as a different format. So if we go here, I can save this now as, say, a JPEG, and I'll just click on save really quickly just to get that file created. Now, when I go here to the local browser in this folder, you can see there is the JPEG and it has the desqueeze applied. So now I can continue editing the photo in Lightroom. And so again, I want to make this point very, very clear. If ACR has a tool that Lightroom doesn't, well, then Lightroom can't process it. It can't render it because the tool isn't there. So that doesn't mean that you can't benefit from it in ACR. You just have to export as, say, a JPEG or a TIFF, and then bring that file into Lightroom and continue using the edit stack there. So that was a very important point I wanted to get out, especially with this video, so that you didn't, use the anamorphic desqueeze, for example, or one of the other tools that I'm about to show you, and wonder why when you open in Lightroom, that effect isn't presented or rendered in Lightroom. All right, before we move on to the next feature, I'm actually super proud of this. Like, I can't believe this actually happened, but in ACR 18.3, if you click on About Camera Raw, you'll see that my photo is here in the About screen, which I don't know, like ACR is literally the engine that drives our edit stack. And so to have my photo be a part of this About screen, for me, I'm very proud of it. And I just wanted to share that really quickly. All right, let's just click the About screen to dismiss it. And so let's move on to the second image. So this new feature is also in the crop panel. And it primarily benefits photos, especially like selfies or group photos where you have people along the edges of the frame. So here, this is me, and these are my two colleagues. That's Howard and Rick. We are at the Lightroom table at Adobe Max. This was taken last year. Now, you might not realize the benefit of this new feature. It's right here under geometry. It's this slider called projection. And so what projection will do is it will kind of fix distortions along the edges of a photo. And so watch, I'm going to take the projection slider here and I'm going to drag it to the right. And I'm looking especially at my head and Howard's head. And I'm adjusting this until it kind of looks normal. So somewhere like this. Now, of course, projection comes at the expense of the original composition. So what I'm going to do is click on this constrain crop checkbox, which constrains the crop. Now let's drop out of edit here so we can see the photo. You can see without the guidelines here. And let's go back to crop because what I want to do is toggle this. So you can see, like, look at my head, look at Howard's head. They're both kind of stretched out, but you don't really notice it until you fix it. Where here, both of our heads look more, I would say, natural. Also, more importantly, look at Rick in the middle. Rick's really not being affected at all. I mean, his proportions look the same, but both me and Howard are fixed much, much more, I would say, pleasantly when you look at the photo. Here's another example. Definitely one that I would say more appropriate, where this is me and my wife. And so you can see, I didn't do this on purpose, but I'm on one side and Ashley is on the other side. And so if I go to crop here and do the same thing, I'm going to adjust the projection slider. And I'm especially looking at Ashley's head because I know kind of what her head is supposed to look like. And right around here looks good. So I'm going to click on the edit stack here. Actually, what I meant to do was also click on constrain crop. And then let's go back to the edit stack. And so now if I hit the backslash key, do you see kind of like both of our heads look a lot more natural? Ashley's definitely looks way more natural. So do I. Whereas without it, it just kind of looks like it's stretched. And of course, this is a product of using kind of like a wide angle selfie camera lens and putting your subjects along the edge of the frame where they will just kind of naturally get distorted. This projection slider helps fix that. Now, just like before, if I click on done over here, that commits it in Bridge. If I go to Lightroom, notice how it is still not fixed. Lightroom does not have the projection slider in the crop panel over here. And so again, if you want to get this effect applied to your photo, what you'll have to do is go into Adobe Camera Raw. You'll save this. And again, we're going to save this as another JPEG. Let's click on done. And we'll go over to Lightroom over here, and you'll see there is the photo with the corrected kind of aspect ratio using projection versus the unedited photo. All right, and so for the third and final new feature to ACR 18.3, this is a huge one. I can't wait for this to get into Lightroom. And I've said many, many times, masking is probably the most powerful component of Lightroom because it takes all of Lightroom's powerful editing tools and it gives you the power to apply those tools locally using powerful masking tools. Some of them are adaptive, some of them are more manual. And we now have a new masking tool here. Let me show it to you right now. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up this photo that I took in Nebraska many years ago. And what I want to do is go to the masking panel right away. And the new tool is, if I click on range here, depth range. Now, you might be saying, well, depth range has always been there, and you're correct, but it was almost always grayed out. The only time you would be able to really use depth range is if you loaded a photo that had a depth map in it already. So think of, say, an iPhone photo where you used portrait mode or an Android photo that had the similar function. As long as it embedded the depth map into the image, then you can use the depth range mask in Lightroom to basically create a mask based on the depth that was perceived. But now we don't need to use the depth map. We can apply this to any photo. So here again, this was a photo that I took with the Sony A9. Certainly did not have any sort of depth map information embedded in the raw file. But what I can do now is click on depth range and you'll see that we have a dropper. So the dropper is what you'll click on basically on what you want to apply the mask to. If I click back here, then it'll create a mask for the background. Or if I click over here, it'll create a mask for the foreground. So let's go ahead and I'm going to click on the truck over here and you can see right off the bat the mask that it created. So it understood kind of the depth here. It got the truck, it got a bit of the pavement, and it got a bit of the grass over here. Now, if I click on this show depth map checkbox, you'll see here a few things. First, you'll see anything that is kind of white is what's closest to you. And then as it goes to darker gray and black, that's further away. And anything that has that overlay color is what the mask selection will include. So if you've used the other range tools here, you're probably familiar with this, or lens blur. It's the same basic principle. This range here is what will be in the mask. So to the left here are things that are closest to you, and to the right are things that are further away. And so as I drag this, you'll see that the mask moves through the frame. And again, this map was created basically dynamically. But what I love is that it identifies the trees. So you can see how as it goes further and further back, it's actually making a selection past the trees. So again, this controls what the selection is. Then the bumpers here control just how kind of wide the selection should be. So as I drag the bumper to the right, it's including more things from kind of the background or the middle ground. And then these here control kind of the transition. Or the fall off or the feather between what is in the selection and what's not. So if I bring this to the edge here, you can see how the mask is a hard line. But as I drag it out, you see how we're kind of feathering that. So I definitely recommend using that. So here what I'll do is I'll kind of bring this back right around there. It looks good. Maybe actually a little bit further there. Let's turn the depth map checkbox off. And I'm going to turn the overlay off so we can see the photo. And now what I can do is just increase the exposure just a bit, maybe warm up that foreground. And let's go ahead and add a little bit of dehaze and a little bit of texture. And then of course, let's go ahead here and let's rename this so we know that this is our foreground mask. Now, of course, I can do this all day. I can create a new mask, go to depth range. I'm going to select the background here. Now you can see if I show the depth map, how now just the background is selected, but it didn't select the trees. It identified the trees as closer to me. And so I can further refine this. If I want the trees in here, I can move this bumper to the left, but I don't want it. I actually want the trees not to be included here. It's actually a very intuitive and very intelligent mask here. I'm very, very impressed. And so let's turn the overlay off. Here I'm going to maybe darken the background, maybe increase some contrast. And of course, because I've got this mask here. I have all of the other benefits of using the masking tools, including add and subtract. And so maybe I don't want the sky included in that. So of course I can go to subtract and then use the adaptive sky option here. And then that'll remove the sky. And so this is a very, very complex mask. You can see that thumbnail right there. I mean, this is fantastic. I absolutely love that we have this here. Let's go ahead and rename this. So I'll call this background minus sky mask. And then let's click on done. Now, I just want to also show you here, I've got an iPhone photo. I actually just took this a few days ago at brunch with my colleague Pete over here. This was just an absolutely delicious chicken and waffle dish. Like, I cannot recommend it enough. If you are in Spokane, Washington, or for that matter, soon to be Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, go to House of Brunch because, this breakfast dish will change your life. So again, I took this photo with my iPhone and I used portrait mode. So you can kind of see that pseudo bokeh in the background. And why I'm showing this to you is because if I go to the masking tool here and we go to range and select depth range, one of the important things that was grayed out earlier was use device depth. So if there is a depth map included, you can take advantage of that just by clicking on this checkbox, and then it'll leverage that. And so here, if I click here, it's basically using a combination of the depth map as well as the selection here. And so you can kind of see here, that is a very, very nice selection there. So if I wanted to, I can make this a little bit brighter. And then again, create new mask, depth range. I'll click back here. Again, you can see basically the flip, and I'll darken that a bit here to create some separation. So even if you used the portrait mode, you can still take advantage of it. You could have always, like I said, taken advantage of it, but you can still take advantage of it here because it still recognizes the depth map. All right, let's go ahead and click on done. And just like before, I want to show you if you open up one of those photos that has a depth range map. So I'm going to open up this photo here. You can see if we go to masking, Lightroom recognizes the masks, but again, depth range is not supported in Lightroom currently. So you'll see here, depth range is not supported on this photo. What does that mean? Well, that means again that you'll have to export these photos as JPEGs or some other baked file so that ACR can render those edits and Lightroom can recognize the new files. All right, so there you have it. Those are 3 very powerful new features that were added to ACR 18.3. Like I said, I just want to highlight the amazing work that this team is doing. And again, if you've got access to ACR, make sure you've got 18.3 installed. You can update that through the Creative Cloud desktop app like all the other apps. And try it out because, these are some powerful features. But here's what's, again, the important point. If you are a Lightroom user and you want to still have those edits rendered, make sure you export out in a new file. That way Lightroom can recognize it until Lightroom gets the features in the app itself. Of course, I mentioned how powerful masking is, and I've got an entire course dedicated to the Lightroom masking panel. So I'll leave a link to that in the description below, and I will update it when the depth range mask has been added to Lightroom the way it is in ACR. So no worries about that. Of course, I mentioned that we had some new features added to Lightroom 9.3. That video is right here, or you can see what YouTube thinks you might like over here. As always, a thumbs up is greatly appreciated, as is clicking on the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified of all future videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.